Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Walt Walker from Greeley and Hanson, the design consultant representing the design consultant for the BSA Primary Treatment Project. We're here with the New York State EFC team, Liz, Eric, and Brenda. I want to express my appreciation to the three of you for your time and leading this presentation, talking about the funding requirements, terms and conditions related to this project. This meeting will be recorded, and we'll also share the meeting slides as part of addendum number 2 that'll be issued in the coming days. Just a friendly reminder to those on the call, please keep your microphones muted. All questions must be submitted in writing. You can add some questions into the chat. We'll read those at the end of the meeting, but any questions must be submitted in writing, and we'll submit formal responses in writing through the addendum. So with that, Liz, I'll turn it over to you and the EFC team. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We're looking forward for the opportunity to kind of go through our terms and conditions for this project. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is Liz Ritchie. I am the section manager in the engineering division that has been working with the authority on projects. I have Eric Moody with me as well. He will be the primary contact in the engineering division that will be working directly with the authority. Brenda Lee Byrne is from our program compliance group, so you'll be working with her as you go through any of your DBE requirements, but of course we're going to talk about that in more detail as we go forward. I do want to just preface that this presentation is specific to the programmatic requirements for this particular project. If folks on the phone have worked with us in the past, depending on funding for different projects, some of the requirements may vary. So I just want to be clear, this is just for this project. All right. All right, so what we're going to go over today is just give a little bit of a background about EFC. If you were unfamiliar with our agency or our program, we won't spend too long on that. But then we're going to cover DBE compliance, American Iron and Steel, and our BABA requirements, some various other requirements that will be applicable to this project. We're going to touch briefly on the document collection and site visit process, which is what EFC does during construction for all of our projects that we fund. And then, whatever Q&As we want to do as part of this presentation. But like Walt said, it sounds like a lot of stuff will be put in writing and developed later. I will say that we're going to predominantly talk about the DBE compliance because that's initially the first programmatic requirement that comes up after awards are done. But of course, we're just going to give an overview on all the requirements that contractors will be required to follow if you're awarded the project. All right, so a little bit about us. We are a funding agency that provides low-cost capital for sewer and wastewater treatment projects. We also have a drinking water state revolving fund. We offer state grants and federal grants, of which this project has kind of hit the bogey in a bunch of these. But we receive money annually from EPA that we are able to loan out to municipalities for to be able to build their projects. And of course, we have programmatic requirements that come with that money that contractors and municipalities need to meet. So we have various grant programs. And like I said in the beginning of the presentation, it's because of the sources of funds that dictates what requirements are in place. So for this particular project, they have received a water infrastructure improvement grant and also bipartisan infrastructure grants. So because of these state and federal grant funds, there are special programmatic requirements that apply to only this project that you may not have seen on other state revolving fund projects that you have worked with in the past. So for all the projects that we fund, the municipalities are required to include our mandatory terms and conditions. So in the specifications that have been put out for this project, you'll have seen hopefully a copy of our, we used to call these bid packets. Now they're referred to as terms and conditions. But this project, because of its federal bill funding, this one is determined to be an equivalency project. You don't really need to know specifically what that means, but just note that this is the terms and conditions packet that is applicable to you, and you are required, well, the authority and the contractor is required to follow all of the requirements held within. So any contracts that are going to be paid for with EFC funds must include this packet and follow the requirements. And for contractors, I'll note that any subcontractor agreements that you execute going forward into construction, our requirements trickle down into those agreements. We recommend that the terms and condition packet is included in any subcontractor agreements that you execute. And we do have companion guidance packets that are available on our website. If you have any questions about any of the things that we talk about today, or as you're reading through the terms and conditions, the guidance packet kind of provides some more general information that might be able to help answer some of your questions. So as a whole, the terms and conditions that apply to this project include this list, and we're going to touch on most of these or all of these in today's presentation. But like I said, we're going to focus a lot today on disadvantaged business enterprise. If you've worked on SRF projects in the past, you may be more familiar with our MWBE program, the Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise. Because this project has federal grant, it is actually needs to comply with DBE. It's a very similar program, but Brenda Lee is going to go through some of the key differences. And that's something that you want to pay attention to early on in your project development. Where the project also needs to comply with equal employment opportunity, American Iron and Steel. We're going to talk about BABA, but really kind of a highlight, this project is not subject to BABA, but this applies to other equivalency projects. We will talk about Davis-Bacon federal prevailing wage, suspension and debarment, restriction on lobbying, prohibition on telecommunications, and the authority will be required to put up a construction sign that highlights the bill funding that this project has. And here I will turn it over to Brenda Lee to lead us through DBE compliance.
With the DBE program compliance, it is strictly with the equivalency. And the participation goal is 20% of any construction contracts that exceed 100,000, service contracts exceeding 25,000. The goal is based against the total contract value, not the grant award. And the goal can be met through participation of certified contractors. If not, and a waiver is needed, then it would be adequate demonstration of good faith efforts. To find the DBE certified vendors for each work task and material that's included in the project, you would use the link that's shown for the New York State Unified Certification Program. And then you would look for through NAICS, using NAICS commodity codes, or the 2 NYSDOT to search and try to find vendors that meet what you're looking for, say it be paving, or if it happens to be PVC pipe, so on and so forth. When you capture those screens, that's part of your good faith effort. Going here, understand and incorporate the mandatory terms and conditions, conducting the good faith efforts towards DBE. When you go to the site and you open the DBE utilization plan, in page 1 is a link that'll take you right to the search site. And then you have the opportunity to list the certified vendors with their work task or material. And then if you are not quite making the goal, part of the good faith effort is detailed in section 4, but you would work closely with your MBO for the community on any compliance issues. If you do need a waiver and good faith efforts, you would need to, and these are listed in section 4, as I said, you would need to provide a schedule of values for each contract, and it needs to show the work, tasks, and materials and the dollar values associated with that. And then you would do the DBE search at that New York State Unified Contractors, using either commodity codes or how it's set up for New York State DOT. Along with that, in any search that it gives you a list of certified vendors, you would then put them on the solicitation log. We have a sample of the form out there that we ask you to use, and it needs to come to us in Excel, and you would solicit each of those certified vendors that are listed. And the contractors must provide good faith effort for any change order over $25,000. And then it's also a letter explaining when you did your waiver work, you know, what work, tasks, and material you were looking for, and how many had certified vendors generated, how many didn't have any, and that's part of your waiver request. At the top is the sample of the solicitation log. Those are the columns that we're needing you to use. There are 2 contacts made. It should be by 2 different types, 1 email, 1 phone, however, and then the overall result at the end. And this is listed, the first example, say there were 3 vendors listed for doors and windows. You would list all of them and what happens, and this is what you're going to provide us. In the bottom is a section that is the waiver request form. Now that one says MWBE. I know that we are making a DBE one because there is a DBE utilization plan out there, but we're going to have a specific DBE waiver request form too. And it's generally the same things in sections 1 and 2. And then when you get to section 4, those are the details of what goes into a good faith effort. So each contractor needs to send in a DBE utilization plan and or waiver request. And I say and or because your utilization could partially meet the goals. So it would be a combination of partially meeting them along with the waiver request, or it might be full and would be the full waiver request. When you send that in, the utilization plan and waiver request should be in Word document form and or fillable PDF because we have to edit and make some, you know, when we process it, along with copies of all your ESD searches, their individual files, one for paving, one for PVC, and then your solicitation log in Excel, along with your letter explaining. And then each month, the contractor should be sending to the MBO the monthly contractor compliance report, which shows the subcontractors that are certified, how much their contract is, if there's been a change, what they've paid previously, and what they've paid up to date. Sometimes if the prime vendor or the contractor is been dispersed 80% of the contract, but the monthly subcontractors on the monthly contractor compliance report shows like a disbursement of 20 or 30%, there will be a hold until those come up, and the MBO uses these to do the quarterly reports. This is the utilization plan. The first section is filled out by the municipality, and this is where the MBO would sign and date. If they send a revised form, they change that date for us, so it's easy for us to see which version we have. Section 2 is filled out by the prime contractor, showing the different information requested. The DBE fair share objectives are what the goals are set at. The proposed is the amount that you're meeting. And then below that is if you don't have participation or if you're short of it, you would check those boxes. Sometimes there are specialty equipment, which is a different item. We can get into that more, or we have a sample that can be set. And then below is where you list the certified contractors that you are going to use, their scope of work, which one they were certified under, full contract value, and then federal ID, phone, email, all of these need to be filled in. The start date and the completion date could be an estimate or it could be TBD. And you do this for each one that you are going to use on the project until you have them all filled in, and then sign at the bottom and provide that to the MBO for them to review. This is the monthly contractor compliance report. This is the one that you're sending to the MBO, showing your subcontractors how much their contract originally was, what it's been revised to, how much you paid that month, how much was previous month, and total payments to date. But if you look up in the top, the last one in the instructions is that this document should include all proofs of payment to the MBO so that they're using this to verify and fill in the quarterly reports, which are needed each quarter as a way to stay in compliance.
Thank you, Brenda Lee. So I'll just highlight the DBE utilization plans and all the documentation that we do. This is a common thing that we see holds up a lot of disbursements to municipalities once we're in a project financing agreement. So I just encourage whoever is awarded this project works very closely with the MBO for the authority, who will then work very closely with Brenda Lee. We can't stress enough about timeliness to revisions that we request, because the quicker we can approve utilization plans and the necessary paperwork, the faster we can get payments to the authority. We're very fast about getting disbursements out, but only if all of the holds that we have internally have been released. So this is one in particular that we see come up a lot. So Brenda Lee is available to help as needed with the MBO, with the authority. So we're here to help if needed. And we don't want to hold up money. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Eric. He's going to walk through some of our other requirements. These will probably happen further in your project development. So we may not go into as much detail, but Eric is available later during construction to go over this as needed.
Thanks, Liz. So the first one first time we're going to talk about here is one that many of you are likely familiar with, which is American iron and steel requirements. So for projects that do have products that are going to be installed that are primarily made of iron and steel, that are made of more than 50% iron and steel for materials, they have to be certified to be made in the United States. So if there is any sort of item that does require AIS, the whole entire job is subject to that requirement, and you can't split out non-AIS materials from the project. So I'll just kind of give a quick overview here of what might be more applicable to this job. So items that will apply for AIS will be your pipes and fittings, your valves. I would like to point out ductwork. That's one that contractors I've worked with in the past, I kind of got some head scratches on. Rebar, structural steel, manhole covers. Items that AIS does not apply to tends to be more along the lines of like process equipment. So on this job, like your pumps, your motors, your drives, your clarifier mechanisms, and your slide gates. Those will not be subject to AIS requirements. Again, that's not inclusive, but a general overview. For items that are subject to AIS, you'll need to provide the recipient, the authority, an AIS certification from the manufacturer supplier. It typically comes in a letter that's very similar to this format. It's typical to see it this way, but it's not always in this fashion. The certification must include the project's name, the location where the item was manufactured or melted, specific items that are covered by the certificate, that this certificate is signed and dated, and it references AIS compliance, and it needs to be a specific SRF AIS compliance reference. So items such as, like there are letters out there for like Buy American, DOT programs, that isn't necessarily acceptable here. Now there is a process to get an AIS waiver. There are 3 different types of waivers. There are availability waivers, cost waivers, and de minimis waivers. So we would just ask if you are running into a situation of trying to procure a product and running into these issues and looking at the possibility of a waiver, please contact the authority in EFC, and we can have more of a broader discussion on the item itself and get EPA into the loop. So ultimately, the waiver would be coming from EPA, and they do product research. So in just a general review, in order to formally, you'll need to formally request a waiver if you intend to, and these are generally speaking the items that we'd be looking for on that waiver request.
Yeah, I will just jump in and highlight this last one. Hopefully you won't need a waiver, but I just highlight that any information that ties specifically to the project, it's kind of what EPA is looking for. If there is some justification that needs to be made for using a foreign product, but just remember, talk to us early, because we don't have much flexibility if we're doing something retroactively.
So there are de minimis waivers. These are more for incidental components for the project. So more or less, like these typically will cover things along the lines of like fasteners that you'll get at like Home Depot, like readily off the shelf items. We'll go over that in a bit. But ultimately, the de minimis waiver is something that you'd be tracking on your own, and that the funds can't be used, for more or less incidental items that are more than 5% of the total cost of materials for the entire project. And a particular item can't exceed more than 1% of the total cost of materials. So in general, like I said, examples of acceptable de minimis items tend to be things like you'll find off the shelf and buy in bulk, such as washers, screws, nuts. Things that aren't considered de minimis tend to be more of like your process piping, your valves, like large structural support systems. I'll also throw the caveat in here of like anchor bolts for pumps and things of that nature. That's not the same type of fastener and bolt that we're talking about that being acceptable for de minimis. So this is an equivalency project. There is Build America, Buy America Act, but BSA does have a waiver letter for this project, so these requirements don't apply to this.
We just threw this in here because you may see that on other funded projects using the bill federal money. So we want you to be aware of it, that it may come up on future projects, but just know it does not apply to this project.
So we'll get into some other requirements. So Davis-Bacon wage rates, these will be included in the contract documents. The contractors are required to post a schedule on site and keep it up to date throughout the duration of construction. And there will be the need to conduct wage interviews with staff on site. Telecommunications exclusions. This is an requirement that may not have been seen before. This is, from an equivalency standpoint, this item does apply. This prohibition is more or less on specific manufacturers of telecommunication and video surveillance equipment. So items like meters, SCADA systems, security systems. These are, something to be mindful of. So, the listed manufacturers, this isn't all encompassing, but do your due diligence, going through more or less the submittal phase. We've checked the contract documents for these manufacturers, but just confirm that these manufacturers aren't on, the submittal on equipment that you'll be providing. So other requirements here, restrictions on lobbying. Construction contracts over $100,000 must sign the EFC lobbying certificate. This is included in the contract documents. This also pertains to your subcontractor agreements as well. There will also be a list of suspension and debarred contractors in the contract documents that you're not able to more or less contract with. As Liz mentioned earlier, this project is required to construct a bill project sign on site within 21 days following the notice to proceed. There is more guidance on this on EFC's website. And if you do have questions, just feel free to let us know. We're happy to help out. Other than that, EFC will be around 40% construction or so. We will be having a document collection process. EFC will reach out to yourself and the authority to obtain documents such as schedule, change orders, subcontract agreements, lobbying certs that we just talked about, AIS certs in particular. You know, in general, that's the list that we'll be looking for, but we'll certainly let you know what documents we're looking for. We will give the caveat here that if we aren't able to obtain these documents by a certain threshold, we will be placing a hold on the project and holding funds back. So it's always it's in everybody's interest to get through this process together. So items that we would recommend, you know, overall for your project and your bid, know the terms and conditions that are a part of the contract documents. Include the terms and conditions in your subcontract agreements. Track your AIS de minimis items. Conduct periodic wage interviews with workers on site. Prepare your monthly DBE forms and submit them to the authority's MBO. And track your AIS certifications and make sure they meet the following criteria. Other than that, EFC will be visiting this project site at least once, if not twice. We will be checking on more or less the overall progress of construction. We'll be checking the posters for wage rates and EEO, and we will be spot checking for AIS materials. So other than that, that's our presentation for everybody today. And we thank you for your time, and we're open to written questions at this time.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just remind everybody that these are the folks that are going to be assigned to this project going forward with the authority. So we'll be happy to work with everyone going forward.
Thank you, Liz, Eric, and Brenda. Much appreciated. And just to add to, in terms of what was shared, for our potential bidders, the terms and conditions and the BIL signage, those documents are in the contract documents. So be on the lookout for those. They are already included in the contract documents.
Also, please note that in the contract bid documents, we do require that those MWBE or DBE forms be filled out as part of the bid package rather than upon award.
That's correct. Good reminder, Rosie. So as we receive the bid packages at the bid due date and looking for completeness, we will be looking for those DBE utilization plans. If we do not see that in the bid package, the package will be deemed incomplete. Any other questions before we conclude here? Well, all right then. Well, thank you again to the EFC team for the presentation. Very informative. We'll include a copy of the slide deck as part of Addendum 2, and we'll shortly have a recording posted on the Buffalo Sewer website under the contracting sub web page. So thank you everyone again. Any additional questions that you can think of afterwards, please reach out to me via email. Thank you, everyone, and have a great week.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.